Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, I would like to thank all of you for your leadership in promoting transparency and efficiency in supervising and regulating our financial institutions. This panel has implemented the major provisions of the Economic Growth, Regulatory Relief, and Consumer Protection Act, and I believe the resiliency of our financial system is now greater than ever before. Vice Chair Quarles, Chairman McWilliams, we have discussed at length on various occasions inter-affiliate margin requirements, and I'm pleased to see your agencies have recently proposed to amend these swap margin requirements. Thank you. The recent rule to exempt inter-affiliate swaps from initial margin requirements is an important step forward in identifying which areas can be simplified, harmonized, and streamlined to eliminate inconsistencies and overlap. And I look forward to continuing our discussion as you develop a final rule that will harmonize the treatment of margin requirements. We have also discussed the commercial end-user concerns with SACR. Again, I'm pleased to see your agencies revise the rule to amend the capital requirements for derivative contracts with commercial end users. You all know the nature of my district. It's capital intensive, it's agriculture, it's energy. So the actions of the Federal Reserve and FDIC have a tremendous impact back home on my constituents. Now, in light of the SACR rule, what are the agency's plans for moving forward with the implementation of Basel III? How does the Federal Reserve and FDIC plan to analyze the impact of those revisions across the U.S. framework to ensure coherence and capital neutrality?
Oh, please go ahead.
True lady.
I'll start with that one. Well, as I indicated, I do think that there are a few principles that we will need to keep in mind as we consider the implementation of the remainder of Basel III. And those principles are that we will maintain the current level of loss absorbency with the industry. We don't believe that the aggregate level of loss absorbency needs to be increased or that it needs to be decreased. We should, and in order to do that, we should look at this implementation as a package. We should consider how the remaining elements work together, how they will work together with the already enacted elements, and while I think that each of them is a useful addition to the overall regulatory framework because of the incentives that they will create for particular actions, we also need to ensure that they are maintaining capital level, as you say, that they're essentially capital neutral. I think that we'll be able to do that by looking at everything as a whole rather than implementing them piecemeal.
If I may add, I do think that with the efforts at Basel, I think we need to take a holistic and comprehensive look at everything and not address the rulemakings piecemeal. And I agree with Vice Chairman Quarles on that. I also think that the Basel Committee can do a little bit more on analyzing the impact of these rules. There are so-called quantitative impact studies, QISs, that the Basel Committee can do, and it's something that the U.S. delegation at the Basel Committee has been insisting on for some time. I can tell you this, when the Basel III rules were promulgated on capital and liquidity, the initial rules, the Basel Committee did do a QIS study, and that study, if I recall correctly, the numbers may evade me, the correct numbers, but was done based on the balance sheets of banks on December 31st, 2009, which was one of the worst times for their balance sheets, and it took into account about 228 financial institutions around the world, only 14 of which were U.S. banks. And if I were in this position where I do have representation on the Basel Committee and the working groups, I would have insisted on a more specific impact at home here in the United States, and an analysis done by the regulatory agencies on how these rules will impact our banks, and not look at 14 out of 228 banks on one of the worst days for their balance sheets in the history.
In a previous hearing, I raised an issue with Chairman Powell that we've been watching here in the committee for quite some time, and that's the implementation of the VOCA rule. And I laud the panel for taking on the task of trying to improve the rule. I suspect my colleagues will raise this issue as well, of course. Chairman Powell indicated at that time he does not consider long-term investments to be an activity that causes safety and soundness concerns. Now, Chairman Quarles, you know, Vice Chairman Chair Quarles, you know I have a tendency to ask things that are semi-reasonable and rational. So with that, yes, that's actually true. Can you commit to us that you will take into consideration how important it is for banks to make these long-term investments while you're working to finalize this portion of the rule?
We will definitely take that into consideration.
See, it was reasonable. Yield back.